Okay, guys, welcome back to the Vulnerability School podcast. I am so excited about this episode. This is going to be awesome. We are talking about pornography. And we have Hunter and Sarah Clark today. And I've known Sarah for a long time. We went to high school together. And so it's been fun to just see each other kind of grow up and stuff. And we're going to kind of go through Hunter's experience with pornography and communicating that with his wife and where he's at now. He now does programs to help men with pornography and help them move through it. And I just think it's such a cool perspective because he's not a therapist by any means or anything, but he's gone through the whole process. And I think there's so much power in that. And so my hope with this episode today is that we can help men and women just understand that it's an okay thing to talk about and to move through. And yeah, so I couldn't imagine having better guests for this subject. And I want you guys to kind of introduce yourselves. So where you're from and kind of what you're doing right now. And then we'll jump into Hunter's story.
Yeah. My name's Hunter. I am from Heber City. I just retired from Door to Door, did it for 6 years, and I am pursuing this full time now. I feel called to it, so that's me.
So cool.
Yeah, I'm Sarah Clark. I'm from Orem. We still live in Orem, and I am a nutrition and fitness coach online. And I have a 7-month-old baby, and her name's Ruby. So that's our family. We have a little dog named Russell.
It's cute.
What else about us? I don't know. That's about
it.
And you both have podcasts. Is yours current right now? Oh, okay. Sarah has a podcast currently.
I have a podcast,
yes,
yeah.
okay.
Just called the Sarah Clark Podcast. So
cool.
No special name. I couldn't think of something cooler, so I was like, well, we'll just name it my name.
And I feel like your whole thing is like helping women kind of love their bodies and like nourish their bodies. And I just think it's so cool.
Yeah,
I love all that you do.
I think, my message is all about developing a better relationship with yourself and your body and with food. And that can actually help in your pursuits to want to improve your body composition. So
yeah. Okay, Hunter, we are going to get into the subject and topic and talk about all the things because it's such a taboo thing. And I think that's why people get so deep into it. And then girls just get destroyed in relationships and not understanding. So yeah, tell us day one.
I do think it is a really hard conversation. So I might say things that may be very new to people, but I'm simply just talking about my process and like how and what's helped me. And it is definitely an unconventional way about going about it. So, day one was, it's funny because I opened up on social media about this. I get guys that talk to me all the time, and I'm very similar to how most guys start on this journey. I was like 10, 11 years old and got my first iPod Touch. And this was actually a big time in history when kids for the first time had internet access in their pockets. Like if you think about it, there was no like tablets, no phones, no nothing. Like this was the first time that if you were going to look at something, you could do it in your privacy and not be on the family computer.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it's like a big turning point in history. And if you look at the stats from like 2007 to 2010, the pornography stats like triple, like crazy. And it's just an exponential curve since then. But yeah, I was just curious, just a young boy, and had a big crush on Megan Fox, saw Transformers 1, and I think I looked up like Megan Fox in bikini videos or something. Very innocent, very innocent as a young boy. And
had you had any like conversations about this with your parents?
Oh no,
like not ever anything like that. Okay.
No, because this was new to them too.
Yeah,
like they didn't.
It's so true. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it was new to them, and no talks. And what's funny is I didn't really feel bad when I did it. It wasn't until later during church is when I started to feel the shame and guilt. But as I kind of got into middle school, that's when the curiosity kind of turned into a coping mechanism. So it's like whenever I felt inadequate, whenever I felt not good enough, I started to turn to that more. Just like people would overeat or binge Netflix, TV, whatever. It's the same concept, just a different category. And in middle school, I felt super alone, pretty much depressed, and No one was talking about it. None of my friends talked about it. And this was kind of a weird transition into high school when everyone started talking about it, almost like jokingly. It was like the normal thing between all the guys.
They're like trying to cope with their shame a little bit by just making jokes, do you think?
Well, I don't know. I think it was just like such a common thing that everyone did it that it almost became like funny.
Yeah.
Like a joke. And interesting enough, because it was taken so lightly, I feel like, I mean, in high school I struggled with it, but I didn't feel like a ton of shame around it. I definitely dealt with it and definitely got addicted, I would say. But really a lot of the shame was gone from it. And crazy enough, like kids would do it at school. Like there was this specific bathroom that if you knew, guys would go there for that.
Yeah, that's crazy. I feel like being a girl, I mean, I know some girls also look at porn, but I feel like growing up Mormon, it was so like, don't do that. Like it was almost normalized for guys a little bit, like, oh, every guy looks at it, but girls like, no, you know what I mean? And so it didn't like literally would have never crossed my mind ever that a guy was going into the bathroom to do that ever.
Yeah. And I don't want to say every guy, but
yeah,
for sure there were guys doing that. It was kind of always the thought of like, oh yeah, I'll just get rid of it when I go on my mission. That's what you do. You go on your mission, you become clean, and then it's over, right? And when my mission came and I tried to kick the habit or the addiction is when I realized, holy crap, like I'm much deeper in this hole than I thought I was.
Yeah.
And it was much harder to quit than I thought. And
like in preparing for your mission?
Yeah, like the 6 months leading up to my mission. And I was able to get a few months clean by just full on like willpower and white knuckling. And got a few months, went on my mission, served in Mexico. And in Mexico, there's flip phones. Like we have little walnut phones. So your only internet access is an hour a week. And it's like you're using that time to write your family.
Yeah.
So wasn't really a problem on my mission.
Did you like open up to your family at all in high school or like a bishop and like kind of told them everything?
Oh yeah.
Or, okay.
I mean, countless bishops in high school. My parents actually caught me in middle school, which that was really hard for me. Yeah. So
how did they like approach that?
So what happened was we had to turn in our phones or our iPods or whatever in every night. And they were just one night like going through mine and they found it. And through the history, yeah. And my mom was very scared. And I think because she was so scared, she didn't act or react in the best way. And it did create a lot of shame.
Because it's not only new for you, but like you said, new for her.
New for her. I'm her first boy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Scary.
Yeah. So she said some things that I don't blame on her. I think it's more society and culture that kind of planted that in her.
Yeah.
But yeah, at this point they knew and I was kind of open with them and went on my mission, was good, came back and I'm like, okay, cool. Like I'm free, right? I don't struggle with this anymore. And it was like a couple months later, I fell back into it because I had my smartphone, internet access 24/7. And I just felt so terrible, like the worst person on the planet. Because it's like, yeah, porn was joked about in high school, but you don't struggle with it after your mission, right?
Yeah.
That was very clear to me and felt super alone. And this is when I was going to college, dating, and I actually broke up with a few girlfriends because of this. I was like, I'm not going to get married until I figure this out.
Yeah.
And broke up with girls for that reason because I hadn't figured it out yet. And then I met Sarah and things were clicking really, really well. And I had the impression, I was like, hey, we need to get married. It just felt good. And porn was still very much in my life. I wasn't going to tell Sarah because my thought process was, oh, it will go away when I get married.
There's always that thing.
Yeah.
Then it will happen.
Yeah. It's like, well, when I get married, I'll be able to have sex and I won't need to go to pornography, right?
Yeah.
That was my thought process. But me and my dad were really close at this point, and he was like, hey, you need to tell her. And it felt right. I didn't want to, but it felt right that I needed to tell her. So I was like, okay, like I'll tell her. And I'm like, well, what if she breaks up with me? He's like, well, you got to deal with those consequences.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay.
Wait, I have a question for Sarah. Did you know like a lot about porn at this time or like
not really?
Like never really had a conversation with it, like about it with someone?
I'll be honest. When I was younger, I had looked at porn like a couple of times.
Yeah.
When I was so young, and this is actually really vulnerable myself. I'm like, and my parents had caught me too. And I didn't feel anything weird about it until my parents were like, hey, did you look at this? I'm like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And I had to go see a bishop about it. And so I think that that's the only thing that I knew about pornography. It was like, oh, I looked at it once and it's bad.
Yeah.
And I feel like all through high school too, since then I never struggled with it because it was just like, I never really had the desire anyways, but all through high school, girls would always say, I will never marry a guy who struggles with pornography. Yeah. And if a guy struggles with pornography, they are cheating. And so it was just, it's just always, all I knew about pornography that it was really, really bad.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I know it's so vulnerable. I appreciate it so much because I know there's girls listening that are in the same situation. Yeah. And I can't relate to that because I never did, and I think it's so important that people could know that. Yeah. And I feel like almost maybe that helped you be a little bit more understanding of him.
For sure. Yeah. And I would actually say that is he can talk more about when he did tell me, but when he did tell me, because I had looked at it years past and know what that felt like, I was able to approach it with a lot more compassion of like, oh my goodness, I feel what you're feeling. Like, ooh, that's a sick feeling. Mm-hmm. And I see you. And then at the same time, it's like, but this is bad. So, I'll talk about that in a second, but before he talks about that, I think that I do feel called, Jenna, to say also, as much as we are talking about men struggling with pornography, I think that girls also need to be heard that girls struggle with pornography too, and they need to be seen and heard in some space. I'm not really sure what that looks like, but for a girl who is listening to this and struggles, just know that nothing's wrong with you either. Yeah, and totally. This stuff that we talk about, I hope it can help and apply to that person, to that girl as well.
Yeah. No, I love that because I think we focus so much, and especially you, taking away the shame around porn. But I think for girls, it's just, I don't know. I feel like that's even just a little, it's so niche. It's a little bit harder almost.
Yeah. I think it's only guys struggle with pornography. Yeah. So when girls are like, oh shoot, but I struggle with pornography, it can actually feel shameful in itself. It's like, oh man, the stats do say that a lot of guys struggle with pornography and not a lot of girls. So when that girl struggles with pornography, they're like, I can see why they'd feel and shame because it's like, oh man, I shouldn't be struggling with this because girls don't struggle with this. Totally. So, obviously this podcast isn't around that, or maybe it is, I just think that there needs to be space that girl feels heard and seen, and this stuff hopefully can help and apply. Yeah. So.
Mm-hmm. It's pretty crazy on the stats. I think right now, this was 4 years ago, 80% of men struggle with it. And it was 45% of women. Yeah. That was 4 years ago, and every year it's increased. So we're definitely over 50% for sure for girls. Back to the story though, I went and told Sarah, and I feel like the way I told her was really important to how we move forward. I basically said, hey, this is something I've struggled with my whole life. This is what I'm doing to overcome it. I had coaches at the time. I was paying for programs, doing all the things. And I said, I'm not going to promise I'm going to be perfect because I don't know, but I do promise to always be open and honest with you with it. If you ever want to talk about it, if you ever want to ask me questions, I'm here, I'm an open book. Yeah. And I think that plus Sarah's experiences in the past gave her a lot of confidence moving forward. It wasn't easy by any means, but definitely gave us confidence to move forward. Yeah. And at this point in my mind, I'm like, yeah, but once we get married, I'm not going to struggle with it. I still had that thought.
And do you feel like you were under that impression too?
That he would never struggle with it again?
Yeah, kind of. That it was once we get married.
Not really. Okay. I feel like internally, obviously, there's this hope of I hope he never struggles with it. But I knew that if I set that expectation for myself, that expectation would kill me. Mm-hmm. And so as much as I wanted to believe that, I married him knowing that it might come up and being okay with that, and knowing that I would have to I am marrying him knowing that I might need to deal with that with him. Yeah, totally. I don't know what it is, Jenna, but part of me was just I knew so strongly that Hunter was my guy to marry that, and I don't want to be I don't know what it was, but I felt like I was going to be a role in his recovery and going to help him with it. Yeah. Obviously it's his problem and his struggle to overcome, but I don't know. I think that because I had looked at it in the past and felt that compassion, I was like, I feel like the way that he did tell me was really helpful.
Yeah.
Because I saw that he was wanting to overcome it. And the way that he told me, like, I saw that it meant a lot to him and that he was in this deep hole and that he wanted to get out of it. And so I think that seeing his desire to want to overcome it made me have more belief in him, being like, okay, because he has that desire, I know that. And the honesty to tell me so early in our relationship while dating helped me start our relationship off with a lot of trust.
How early did you tell her?
Like a month.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
But we only dated for like 3 months too. Like we did. Hunter and I met and married in 4 months. So it was pretty, he's rubbing his eyes. It was pretty quick, but we both didn't work. So we hung out every day, all day. We went on 4 different trips together. I would say our relationship progressed pretty quick, but he did tell me really soon into our relationship, which also meant a lot to me. Like, he sees potential in us and he also is very honest and has the desire to overcome this. I believed in him. I totally believed that you would be able to overcome it too.
Okay. And then where next, like what happened after that? Like you told her and then.
Told her. And
did you feel like you telling her made it like less of a temptation for you? Being able to be open about it?
I don't remember in that detail, but we got married, kind of going through the story some more. And our first 8 months, like honeymoon phase was amazing. Didn't struggle with it. And my thought was like, oh, that's all I needed. I just needed to get married. That was it. Right. That's the key out. And then 8 months in, it started to slowly creep back in. And I think for a couple of reasons is one, I never really dealt how to overcome it, or I never actually overcame it. It was always just like busy, avoid, then the pressure of sales, door-to-door sales, and leading teams and being married was just like a ton of pressure.
Yeah.
And 1.5 years into our marriage is when it like really came back strong. And this is by far when I felt the worst about it. Most shame, most guilt, because, okay, it's fun. It's funny in high school, right?
Yeah.
Returned missionaries don't struggle with it, but especially married men.
Totally.
Do not struggle with this. I always kept a very open book with Sarah, was honest with her, and I think she was a big part of my journey. And I would say the very first step of my progression was actually opening up about it, not just to Sarah, but to a lot of people. I started opening up to my sales teams about it. I started opening up to a lot of people about it.
And how did you like come to that conclusion?
Well, let me actually back up. There was something that happened before that. So there's this one story where Sarah and I were driving to California. We had a Sprinter van. It was like built out camper van.
You did your podcast in there. Right?
Yeah.
That's
and
so
it had a bed in the back, and I was driving and I let Sarah drive for a sec so I could take a nap. And in the back, there's no seatbelts, right? She's going 85 down the freeway and I'm just back there, and she hits the rumble strips. And like, you're in the back of a van and you can like really feel it in the back. And I remember thinking so vividly of if she went off the road, we would roll for sure. Like, it's a big, tall Sprinter van.
Yeah.
And I would for sure die. I was like, I honestly would feel good about that. Like, if it just ended right now, I'd be okay.
Yeah.
Because it was the easy way out. It was like, I wouldn't have to go through this anymore. I wouldn't have to deal with it. And I don't want to commit suicide, right? But this was the easy way out. And I remember also thinking in that van that we had just made the most money that we ever had. And I remember thinking I would trade every penny for this to go away.
Wow.
Every single penny. That's kind of when I took a step back and was like, okay, there's something here. Obviously, I'm not the only one struggling with this. And if I feel this way, there's got to be a way out, and there's got to be more resources.
Had you opened up to her that you were looking at it again already? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I still remember the first time he messed up in our marriage, and it was like 10 months in to our marriage. I remember the exact situation of him telling me, but it wasn't.
Like, how did you feel too?
Yeah, it was, we got done with the summer sale season. We were living in his parents' basement. I had left to go somewhere, and I came back, and I could just tell Hunter's energy was off. You were really down and sad, and he told me that he needed to talk to me. And I sat down, and in that moment, I just kind of knew. Like, I was just like,
Yeah.
he messed up. And he told me that he messed up. And obviously it's just like, I think my thought then obviously was just bummed. I was like, shoot, like I knew that I married him knowing this might come up.
Yeah.
And it did. And so I just felt bummed, and I felt sad. I think
Did you feel like it was like that you weren't good enough kind of?
Not yet.
Okay.
I think it didn't come up yet. I think I mostly felt numb.
Yeah.
I was like, how should I feel about this? And I was trying to figure out, like, how do I feel? Because I was just like, oh, this feels so weird. Like, my husband just struggled with pornography, or just looked at pornography, and we're married. So I think in the exact moment, I just felt numb.
Yeah.
Just felt like, what the heck? Okay, I married this. I knew this was going to come up. What do I do? How do I react?
Did you talk to anybody about it?
The only person I talked to about it before I got married was my sister. Nobody else.
Yeah.
And honestly, nobody else for the first 2.5, 3 years of our marriage, that I never talked to anybody about it. I don't want people to see Hunter as someone who struggled with pornography.
Yeah, totally.
Because I married Hunter for so many other reasons than I didn't marry him. Like, obviously I didn't marry him because he struggles with pornography. No way. Duh. But like, I didn't see him as that. Obviously I married him for so many other reasons. And I didn't want people and I know I've had cousins and situations in my personal family that, you know, there was a pornography problem and it separated a marriage, and there was a lot of abusive towards
Yeah.
it. So I knew, I didn't tell my parents that he struggled with pornography before we got married, because I knew my mom would tell me to not marry him.
Yeah.
And I felt really strongly that I wanted to marry him. So I kept it a secret, which was hard, which was good, I think, at first, but then it did become really hard because I felt really alone as a spouse. Because I felt you don't know you need someone to talk to about it, but you want to protect your husband, but also you want to protect yourself too, because there's also kind of this weird feeling of like, I married a guy who struggled with pornography. Like, why would any girl do that? Because remember, girls don't marry guys that struggle with pornography.
Yep.
And
like
so
that deep-rooted belief.
Yeah. So it's like, what does that mean about myself too, that I married a guy that struggled with pornography, and I knew that before I got married. And so there's just, it was just a lot of weird feelings. Like, who do I talk to? What do I do? How do I feel about this? And so, I think for a long time, the only person I talked to about it was, I told my sister before we got married, just in one conversation, but never really brought it up to her for a while after. So it was just between him and I and my own mind of going crazy.
Yeah.
So the reason why I opened up to more people is I had heard from like a podcast or something that opening up about your struggles or your addiction or whatever it is actually helps heal. And at this point, I'm so desperate. I'm like, sure. Yeah. Like, I'll try anything.
Yeah.
So I started opening up to my sales teams about it, and I got a lot of really good feedback, and I quickly realized that I was not alone.
Yeah.
And I was definitely not the only married guy dealing with this. And I just felt really grateful that I was in a position where I had told my wife, because there are guys out there that they thought it would go away when they got married and they didn't say anything. And now they're 3 to 10 years into marriage and they still haven't told their spouse.
Yeah.
That's a really hard spot to be in. But I think why that was such a progressional thing for me is because it started to de-shame it. It started to get rid of the shame, because I realized that people still loved me just as much with or without pornography. And
it almost just makes you a little bit more real too.
Totally.
Yeah. Like, I'm sure so many of your guys were struggling with the same thing.
Huge portion. Yeah. Yeah. A lot of guys were. Yeah, that was kind of the first few steps of progression.
Although that first time he told me, it was more of like a numb feeling, because I think it was a lot of like, okay, how should I feel? Mm-hmm. And then as he started having more and more slip ups is when I think I started making it mean something about me. Like, okay, I'm not good enough. My body's not sexy enough.
Yeah. And like, if you feel comfortable, did it like make you almost not want to have sex?
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cause I was like, he's looking at my body and
imagining these women.
Yeah. Imagining these women. And like, there's no, like, I don't know what these women look like on there, and I don't want to know.
Yeah.
Which I also want to make a point. I think that you don't need to know what your husband looks at, because I feel like that will probably do more harm than good. And I never wanted to know.
And I think that's a good point to say, because I've had that thought. Like, I've had friends say, like I remember on the Girls Camp podcast, someone said like, you just need to see what it is so you can just understand it's not like that big of a deal. But like, I would always be like, I don't know. Like, I just didn't want to. And I think it's to each their own, but
to each their own. Cause I mean, from what I've learned from Hunter, now that he's been in this space, I've learned more about like pornography, and that there's so many different kinds of pornography, and there's a wide range of like more quote unquote innocent stuff to more like abusive stuff.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, regardless, maybe to each their own. I never really cared to know what he looked at for my own sake. I didn't want to compare and I didn't want to know, but
and just having that image in your head.
Just having that image ingrained in my head of like, I know my husband looked at that girl, looked like that. I'm like, that's just gonna that's not gonna do any good to me. But you know, it was hard to want to dress in front of him and be in front of him. And I always felt like I had to like flex in front of him and look a certain way. And there was this pressure of like, needing to look a certain way so that my husband is more attracted to me and appealed by me, and just feeling, I remember a specific scenario when he, you know, it's really hard too, because in the 3.5 years that we've been married, he's had times that he's messed up a lot and then he'll do really good. And then all of a sudden he'll mess up a lot. And it's usually after the really doing good and then mess up that I'll have like these huge breakdowns of just like, holy, I thought we were finally over this. Yeah. And I remember one specific scenario when we were in our house, and he told me, and I just broke down bawling, and I went to my bathroom and I was like, I can't talk to you. I can't look at you. Like, I can't believe this is happening. It's like, I want to be there for you and I want to believe in you, and I do, but like, I feel so crappy right now. Yeah. I'm not helping you and I don't know how to help. And it's so hard as women too, because I think that it's so hard figuring out like, okay, how do I react in a way that I can be there for my husband and help him, but also allow myself space to feel what I need to feel. And I think Hunter and I have kind of figured that out, but there have been so many times where I'm just like, I can't be there for you, but because I need to be there for myself, but I also, or if I'm there for you, then I'm not there for myself, and I'm shoving all these feelings down like, okay, no, I believe in you. I'm good. We can do this. And then internally I'm like, I suck. I'm not good enough. Like I'm crying inside. Like my husband struggles with pornography. And at this point, like I had no one to talk to about it. I had no one to vent these feelings to, because if I vent them to Hunter, it's just going to make Hunter feel more shame. Yeah. And if I vent to somebody else, then they're going to start looking at Hunter like, Hunter struggles with pornography. Yeah. And then I also just like, I just didn't know who, how, what.
And then also these thoughts come in, at least for me, I'm sure you can relate, of like, my body's going to change. And the more it changes, are you going to watch more pornography, you know, or like, are you gonna like my body less, like after I have babies, or I do these things, and then it's going to be like, that issue is going to be even stronger. So then it would even scare me to be like, oh, I want to have kids because I don't want my body to change, and I don't want you to, you know?
Totally. Well, then it's like, then you kind of start, and I think this is something too, is like, well, now if I do want to change my body composition, am I just changing it for my husband? Mm-hmm. Like, and that shouldn't be the reason, right? Like if you want to change your body, it should come from if that feels good to you.
I think as women growing up, especially, like I feel so strongly that like I've lived my whole life thinking my body is for a man. My body is for men. And I feel like I'm getting to this point in my life where I'm like, no, my body is for me. Mm-hmm. You know, like I went to like this sexy dance class with some friends, and it was like so empowering just to be like, this is for me. This isn't, no man is watching right now. This is all me. And I think it's so important that we can like get to that point. Yeah. You know? Yeah. Especially in a situation like this.
Totally. And I'm going to pass the microphone to you, babe. But I just feel like this is recent healing, where I feel like something that Hunter's pornography issue, although it's his issue, it's illuminated things inside of me that need to be healed. And so like what I've realized, sorry, I'm going to get emotional myself. Sorry, this is it. I accident myself to get emotional.
No, we love it. Vulnerability is cool.
Yeah. I just think his pornography issue made me realize how much I needed to develop more self-acceptance towards my own body and self-love towards who I am as a person. And also, I feel really weird saying this because the way that I grew up, but like also my own sexuality. Yeah. Like, I think that the idea of sex and being sexual and like sexy has always felt really uncomfortable for me. And this is something that's new for me that I'm discovering about myself, is like, I am okay to feel sexy
in
the body that I'm in right now. And I don't need to look a certain way or be a certain way.
And you can be sexy for yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that like, it was always like, I need to change my body to be sexy in the way that Hunter wants me to be sexy, because that's what's going to make our relationship better. But in reality, what I've realized through his pornography issue, it's helped me realize, like, no, I can be sexy and sensual and all of that for myself. And as I fill my sensual cup, that can overspill into our relationship. It has nothing to do with me, although it's really easy to make it seem like that.
Yeah.
Has nothing to do with me, and actually everything to do with my relationship. It illuminated the quality of my relationship with myself and showed me what parts inside me need to be accepted and loved and healed. And it's been actually a really amazing journey for me, because I can like it's still a journey. Like I'm not saying I'm perfect or anything like that. It's still a journey, but like I can confidently say like, I feel so much more at peace with my body than I have in my entire life.
Yeah.
And so much acceptance around it. And, I just had a baby 7 months ago. So like we could say like my body's not in this perfect physical shape right now, but that's okay, because I've been able to work on that and my own internal beliefs. It's interesting because I think that through this process of me working on my own internal self, it's actually improved Hunter and I's relationship, and actually our sex life too. I was actually having a conversation with a friend the other day, and she just figured out that her boyfriend messed up with pornography. And so she was coming to me like, what do I do? And she was telling me, and she said, I just feel like I need that validation that my body is good enough from him. And he would always tell me that, she said she's always struggled with body image, and she gained a lot of that validation of feeling better about her body from him. And so that when he messed up with pornography, she was like, wait, what? Like, is my body not good enough for you?
Yeah.
And so she was telling me, she's like, I need that validation from him. I'm like, you need that validation for yourself.
Yeah.
Like that is showing inside you that you need to validate yourself, because one day he might not be in your life anymore. And so if he's not in your life anymore, giving you that validation, then who's going to give yourself that validation? Only you.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think that for the woman whose spouse is struggling with it or messing up with it, I think it's so important to know that it has nothing to do with you and everything to do with the way that your spouse or boyfriend or husband is coping with their emotions. Something that has really helped me to understand Hunter's pornography addiction better is, I was on this call with this lady one time, and she was explaining it to me. She's like, men have grown up to be, we can call it masculine toxicity or whatever, like tough and hardworking and not emotional, and guys don't cry. And they're just like the go-getters. And, we always say like, be tough, be tough. And so when guys feel emotional, what do they do with it? They stuff it all down. No, they're tough. They don't do anything with it. And so, but that emotion, that energy, it needs to get released. And so how do guys release it? Porn and masturbation. Mm-hmm. Like when they orgasm, when they masturbate, that's energy being released. That was really eye-opening to me, to be like, okay, it's just a way of releasing energy for him. And at the same time, guys have no way of they haven't been taught how to cope with their emotions. Yeah. Like, girls, we cry. When I'm sad or frustrated, I just cry. That's a healthy way of coping with your emotions. So you can just cry, or you can vent. Guys don't vent.
Yeah, it's not cool.
Yeah, it's not cool. Like, you don't tell your emotions. You don't vent about them. And so guys haven't been taught how to healthily cope with their emotions. And so what do? They just look at pornography and masturbate, because that's the way that they have coped with their emotions. And same thing, like I was able to resonate with that. An unhealthy coping mechanism that I have is I pick at my skin a lot. When I see a little pimple on my skin, I pick at it. And it's like when I'm bored or when I'm sad or frustrated or like trying to procrastinate, I pick at my skin. And obviously that's pornography is probably a little bit more extreme of a coping mechanism than that. But it helped me to gain a little bit more empathy or understanding for Hunter of like, okay, this is something that I have a really hard time not doing.
Yeah. Totally.
Same thing with you. It's like because I was like, I think it's easy for girls to be like, why don't you just stop? Like, just stop. delete Instagram, delete this, do this. And there are so many ways to get around the blocks. There are so many ways to get around everything. Like there's always a way to get around it. And so just putting blocks and things like that could be helpful temporarily, but long term, it's just a Band-Aid on what's actually happening.
Yeah.
It's what's really going to help is like allowing space to figure out, well, why do you look at pornography? What are, when do you look at pornography? What are the feelings that you're feeling? What are some of the past experiences that you have felt that's causing you to feel these things and that's making you need to release it this way? And how can we maybe think about them differently? Or
at this like point in your relationship, did you realize that? Like that these were like just coping mechanisms of, you didn't, like it was just like an addiction. You just felt like.
No, for sure was looking at porn as the problem, not a symptom.
Yeah. Like you didn't think it was
problem.
like deeper rooted. Yeah.
Totally.
Mm-hmm. I think you should continue on this, but I think that girls need to understand that guys don't understand that too.
Yeah.
Like, although I'm saying this, like, guys are dealing with this because they need to release some energy and emotions, and they're coping with something, an emotion that's inside them. Most guys don't realize that they're looking at pornography because they're coping with emotions or because they need an energy release. It's a very unconscious thing.
Totally.
Which I think that one of the things that helps him in overcoming pornography is by first bringing awareness to that fact of like, oh, this is just a way that I'm coping with my emotions. And that's maybe not such a bad thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Sarah just told my whole story. She knows it better than I do. No,
it's so awesome. It's like really shows how involved you really are and like how much you really care, which I think is so cool because it's like you guys are so in this together. It's not your issue. It's your issue as a whole, Yeah.
As we progressed in our marriage, there were a few other steps that got me where I'm at right now. And I feel like there's 3 levels of progression when it comes to pornography. There's the level of, I think it's bad, but I can't stop looking at it. There's another level you could quote unquote say better. That's, I don't look at it because of fear, because I don't want to get a divorce and all this, and I don't look at it. And then there's another level that I feel like I've gotten to that's, no, I can look at it. I can choose to, but I don't want to. Mm-hmm. Like the desire is gone. It's not because I fear it. It's not because it's like a constant pull to me. It's just like, right now, I'm just like, porn isn't good nor bad. It's just kind of lame. Yeah. And like, that's how I feel. So it's been a huge step to get to that point where now I feel like we're stepping into long-term results. Because there have been times where I'd gone 100 and 150 days, 200 days without it, but freaking slammed back into it. When now I feel like the desire is going away and I don't need to struggle with this my whole life. It doesn't need to be a temptation because now I fully see it for what it is. Yeah. And it's kind of lame. Not so that like it's bad.
Fully understanding it. It's like really
it's like that whole nother level. Most guys are in level 1 where they can't stop looking at it and they think it's bad. Yeah. Level 2 is they don't look at it from fear. Level 3 is you choose not to look at it. And that's where I feel like I want to help guys get to.
Yeah. That's so cool. Point.
I had never done like traditional therapy, but I had spent like $12,000 in coaching courses, all of this.
So sorry, up until this point, like when you guys had that conversation, your way of getting around it was literally just avoiding it. Like you were just trying to avoid it, nothing deeper
white
than that.
Knuckle.
Okay.
Porn is the problem, stop porn.
Yeah.
Blockers, everything avoid at this point.
Okay. That's so hard. That's so hard because you just don't know that it's like so much deeper than that. And it's like just trying to avoid. It's like that icebreaker like thing that we always see. You can only see the tip of the iceberg, but it's like so much more. Like you couldn't even see that there was just all of that.
Totally. And you guys were talking about it a little earlier, and I just want to harp on it again, is that if you are a spouse, your spouse struggles with pornography, it is not about you, period. Period, end of story. It's not about you. If he married a supermodel, but he still coped with these emotions through pornography, he would still turn to pornography. Even you take the best body in the world or the most beautiful girl in the world, whatever, like he would still struggle.
Yeah.
So it's not about you.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. Thank you for sharing that. Because I still, even like dating, I just like, it's always in the back of my mind, Like it's just...
And you have the right? Like women are totally valid in their feelings for feeling that way. And I think that's just where we're trying to shed a little bit more light to it And don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm sure there are some guys out there that are using it for that, but I would say 98% of guys are just coping with feelings they don't know how to deal with.
Yeah. I would love for like people listening and me, like, what do you think is the best way to like even start this conversation? Not even the very initial time when you guys talked about pornography, but again and again and again, when that would be brought up. I'd love to know like the process of that, what you have done, what you would have done better, like that kind of thing.
There's a lot to this, and I don't think there's a right answer. And by no means are we experts on this, but this is the balance. Like, I don't know. I personally tell Sarah every time I mess up. Like, that's just how we do it. But I have actually talked to spouses that say, I don't want to know. Like, it throws me off. I don't want to hear when he starts. Like, let's have a check-in like every 3-4 months. You know, so I don't know what that balance is. But I would think for the guy is you can just feel it. If you can feel something is off, it's like, dude, that's a pretty obvious clue that like you need to talk to her. But if you don't feel it, then maybe have a checkup in a couple months or a month. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of my thought.
Yeah,
towards
totally.
it.
Yeah, I think that kind of what Hunter was saying is I think it's important to have a conversation with your spouse together as a couple and say, how do we want to communicate about this and how do you want to approach it? Because I think that it's really how it's communicated is really to each their own. And I think it's been a trial and error for Hunter and I of figuring out how we want to communicate about it. Because for Hunter, he feels best to tell me within 24 hours of the mess up. And honestly, like, I also feel better when he tells me.
Yeah.
I personally, when he messes up and doesn't tell me, I can feel it. I can usually feel it because he's usually off, and I just know.
Yeah.
And I can sense it.
I think that's so beautiful about you guys, though, that like you can just communicate that. I know it's probably taken so much work, but like that's really cool that you can just feel that and then you can just move through it. Because I think a lot of couples are missing that, and it's just so sad.
And I think, you know, in the actual conversation itself, when Hunter comes to me and says, hey, I want to talk to you, usually at that point when the conversation starts, I already know, like, he's going to tell me he messed up.
Have you personally been able to remove the idea that has anything to do with you?
The stories still come up for sure. But the difference is I may be able to be more aware of them and, like, say goodbye to them, where in the past they would just sit in me. So they definitely still come up. I'm like, oh, and I see them like, oh my goodness. And a coach that I worked with one time told me, she's like, literally look at those stories, like the stories of like, oh my goodness, I'm not good enough. I'm not sexy enough. Okay. I feel like, you know, I've lost some weight. Am I still not like skinny enough for you? And just seeing them as thoughts and letting them pass away like clouds, like, goodbye, like you're not serving me. Because really those aren't. They're just stories. They're stories that are not serving me. Yeah. And so they still do come up whenever, you know, when he has told me, but I just have learned through lots and lots of practice. It's not perfect to just like let those stories pass by. And I think that something that has helped me too, and something that's helped Hunter and I is, you know, I don't want girls to think that they need to be tough when the guys tell them, because your emotions are still valid. And if those stories come up, maybe they don't pass like clouds right away, especially if this is still new for you. Like you might need space. And this is something that Hunter and I've learned. Like when he comes and tells me, he's like, hey, I messed up with pornography. It's usually like, okay, now let's separate for a second so that I can have time to feel my feelings. And luckily I have people in my life now that I can actually vent to and talk to about it, which has been really, really healthy for me, where in the past I didn't.
Are those like friends or someone you met in like a support group
friends
or something?
and like my coaches.
Okay.
And yeah, I mostly I have a coach that I talk to about it.
That's really cool.
Yeah. And some friends and my sister sometimes. So anyways, just depends. But I have those people in my life now. And then also Hunter's able to take his space and process his emotions and his feelings. And I feel like by us doing that, it's created less shame for him, because sometimes what would happen in our communication is I would start having these stories come in my head, and then I would start feeling really emotional, and then Hunter would start feeling really bad that he made me feel this way, which would then cause him to fall into this spiral and this shame loop, which would make things even harder for him. And then he would just be in this shame pit where I'm like in this I feel like crap pit. But I also don't want you to feel shame, but like, how do I feel what I want to feel? So yeah, I feel like that's what's really helped us is.
I have a question.
Yes.
Like if he told you today, like how would that go? You know what I mean? Like how would you guys most effectively communicate that.
Yeah. If I had, which this is actually a really important part of my journey, is I have taken the pressure off myself to be perfect. I think for some weird reason, we are okay not being perfect in every other aspect of our life, but for this one thing, we have to be completely perfect. And so taking that pressure off has helped me immensely. And if I was to have a slip up in the future, just because we've communicated it, it would be 24 hours. Like that's my time window. I would talk to Sarah and I would just say, hey, this is what happened. I messed up. This is kind of what I was feeling. This is what I was avoiding. This is what happened. Kind of game plan.
So you even talk about the deeper meaning. Like, this is why I think this came, because I'm coping with this thing.
We try to, yes.
That's really cool.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would say that's really helpful for me because I personally like to know, like, oh, okay, when, like, well, I don't necessarily need to know when it happened. I know sometimes I like to know more, like, well, how did you feel when you messed up? Like, what triggered it and what caused it?
And that's probably helpful for you to like.
I think it's helpful for him, but it's also helpful for me because if he's just like, hey, babe, I messed up. I'm like, okay, now what?
Yeah.
It's helpful to hear like, hey, babe, I messed up. This is what happened. And this is kind of what my plan is. And I need some space. Then it helps me feel like, okay, he's messed up and he's thought through it a little bit and he has a plan moving forward. And so I can continue to trust and believe in him. Where if he's like, babe, I messed up. I'm so sorry. And I'm like, it's okay. But like, now what?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so I feel like that's what's been really helpful for me, at least, is to know that, is to see that side of things. Like, okay, well, what was the situation you were in? And
yeah. And so it sounds like you approach it from like a very curious perspective,
yes.
which I think is really important because I had a conversation with my friend about this the other day about pornography and her husband. And she's like, the second I switched to a curious mindset instead of attack, like our relationship completely changed.
Totally. I 1,000,000% agree with that. I think that there's 3 things that I think that can change anybody's life, and not just in this situation, but especially in this situation, is like approach it with a curious mindset, develop self-awareness for what's going on inside your head, and also getting curious about those stories, and also being intentional of like what you say and those. Yeah, I just think intentionality is important too. But yeah, I think coming at it with a curious mindset is huge.
I think if guys can get into integrity with their spouse and they can get rid of shame around pornography, I full-heartedly believe they've done 80% of the work that they need to do to quit the addiction, the habit, whatever it is.
Say that again, the 2 things.
So if they can get rid of shame and if they can get into integrity, whatever that looks like, they've done 80% of the work that they need to do. I personally believe that.
Yeah.
So it's like you said earlier when you're like, yeah, Hunter, not a therapist. And like, no way am I claiming to be a therapist, but I do know those 2 things for a fact. And if I can get guys 80% of the way.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
and now
man,
you're a coach.
It would change.
So.
Yeah. I mean, whatever you want to call coach,
Yeah.
but if I can get guys 80%, it's usually.
So like with your program right now, I kind of want to jump into that for a sec. Like what are you going to do to start? How are you going to go about this program?
Yeah. So I believe in getting rid of the shame. And the way you do that is by talking about it.
Yeah.
And talking to a therapist.
And this is virtual or in
virtual.
person? Okay.
Yeah. So talking to a therapist or a bishop or someone isn't really getting rid of the shame. So I created a group program where 8 guys get together and we all talk about it together. So we're all in the same shoes and we talk about it. And then I have challenges of like, okay, this week's challenge, you're going to go tell 3 new people that you've never told before. And there's also a part where it's like, hey, it's not mandatory, but like if you can tell your parents, for some reason, that is like a huge step forward for a lot of guys.
Wow, I wouldn't have thought of that. That's awesome. Yeah.
So the program is 2 things: get rid of shame, and then 2, let's not look at pornography as bad. Let's look at it as neutral. It's not good nor bad. There's studies on both. There's studies that it's good. There's studies that it's bad. So we're going to take a neutral approach. And when you feel the urge to look at pornography, you leave that on the table. It's an option. You can go look at it. But we're going to take a step back and say, what am I running from? What am I trying to avoid in this moment? So what I do, even like I still get temptations, not nearly as strong. But like a couple weeks ago, I got one. And I said, I can view this right now. I can. But I'm going to wait a couple of hours. And that kind of detached me from the situation of like, okay, what am I feeling? Why am I trying to turn to this? And then I tell myself, if 12 o'clock comes and I'm still feeling it, I will fully allow myself to do it. But 99% of the time when I do that, I don't feel the urge anymore. So that's kind of how I get through it.
Do you guys envision like you doing kind of something for the women of these people or the spouses or girlfriends?
So, yeah, I'll add in and then she can talk. Part of my program is spouse support. So we do actually have calls for the spouses.
I love that. Yeah.
And my goal is to not justify anybody's actions. It's to simply provide space. Because like Sarah was saying, as much as they need to provide a safe place for their husband and not shame their husband, they also need to express their emotions. So we created something that creates that space for spouses.
So, and you guys listened to Christian's episodes last week, and he talked all about community and how healing and like you can go to therapy, you can do all these things, but you need a community. And so I think this is really awesome what you guys are doing. And I think it's so important that people can make that connection too. Like, it's so cool to see you talk about pornography and how like you felt that little temptation the other day, but it's not taking over your entire life anymore. Mm-hmm. And that's because you went deep and you figured yourself out. And if you feel comfortable, like did you feel like main things that you were kind of escaping from when you dug deep?
Yeah, there was a lot when I actually kind of went into it. A lot of it was inadequacy. A lot of it was stress. And I don't like using those surface level things because each thing has a much deeper root to it, right? But I would definitely say inadequacy was a big thing that I was trying to escape from. And I just had felt that since I was very little.
Yeah.
I was just inadequate. I wasn't the best at sports, whatever,
Yeah.
And that was a thing that I was like, dude, I'm 27. I'm still dealing with that. That was a surprise to me. And there was almost like an ego to it. It's like, dude, stop being
don't be the victim.
Stop being a wussy, dude. Like, you're not dealing with this stuff from your childhood when in actuality, I very much still was dealing with childhood stuff.
Yeah, we all are. Like, I would say almost like 80% of our thoughts, I've heard this statistic, I don't know if it's true, but 80% of our thoughts come from when we're 0 to 8 years old. Like, all of our beliefs, everything stems from that. But it's so easy to be like, oh, I'm not a victim. I don't want to think like that. But like, that is just like factual. Like, that's, your beliefs stem from your childhood and how you were raised and how you thought about yourself.
And for men, that, in my personal experience, it was very hard to actually accept that. But when I accepted it, then it went away and now I don't deal with it. Yeah. So I don't know.
Yeah. And you would have been fighting with that for the rest of your life.
I mean, I would think so.
Like just fighting yourself almost. It's almost like we feel uncomfortable being comfortable with ourselves, which I think Christian and I touched a little bit on, but it's so sad that we constantly feel this need to like escape ourselves and that we just feel like we can't find the answer. We don't know what's going on, but really the answer is just to slow down and be with yourself, which is so crazy.
I think that for girls to understand this as well from a perspective is, I think for girls, body image is a really big thing. And I think a belief that is common is if I accept my body where it's at right now, then it won't change. Then I'll stay where I'm at. And so a lot of women don't.
We live our whole lives with that mindset.
Yep. So
our whole lives. I always think about this. That I'm always constantly like, well, then I'll be skinny. Well, then I'll do this. But I'll never just love who I am right now. Like, how could I love this extra little skin right here?
Totally.
No way.
See, and I think it's like, do you want to live your entire life hating your body? But the girls are like, but if I accept my body, then I'll never achieve that skinny look. But it's like, well, has hating your body worked at this point?
Yeah.
And so I think to help understand, one, I think that I personally believe when you accept your body, it might actually help you to change your body. And when you can work on the emotional stuff, it actually will help you to change your body.
And we store a lot of trauma in our bodies.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that can correlate to, pornography is, I think for women, and I know this was something that was really scary for me when Hunter has brought up the idea of like, pornography is not good or bad. I'm like, no, it's bad. It is bad. Yeah. It has to be bad.
Yes, totally.
But it's interesting because then there's another part of me that I'm like, no, but I can see it's like food as well. Obviously, I'm bringing up food and body because this is like what I
It's your whole life.
It's my work. But like, if you think about like the cookie on the table, right? If we're like, that cookie's bad, we can't eat the cookies. Most likely you're probably going to eat like 10 of them. And then all of a sudden you're feel like shame and guilt about it. But if we can be like, hey, cookie's not good or bad. It's just a cookie. Like, I actually enjoy eating a cookie. It's so delicious. It brings me some joy. I kind of want one. And then when you can eat it and enjoy it, and then it's not such a bad experience, and then you can actually feel satisfied by eating one.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with pornography. Is like, if you can view it as not good or bad, it's just like Hunter is able to see that this actually doesn't really align with who I want to be. I hope you don't mind me sharing this, but we were just talking about in the car, and he's like, I had an experience where he just let himself look at it one time. And after that experience, he was like, it was so lame. Like, I didn't care for it.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
That's the same thing with like cookies. Like, if you eat the cookie and you're like, oh, I thought I was really going to enjoy that, but I kind of feel sick to my stomach now. And you're like, okay, actually, I probably don't really want that anymore.
Yeah.
So I think that it just kind of it all correlates, and seeing it from that perspective helped me understand it a lot better. Of like, okay, pornography maybe isn't good or bad, and it still feels kind of uncomfortable to me, to be completely honest. I'm like, no. Part of me is still like, no, it is bad.
I know. Yeah.
And I think that part of that is also maybe society and like religious stuff that we've grown up. It's always just been, against the word of wisdom and stuff like that. So,
okay, I want to hear a little bit about your ayahuasca experience.
There became a point, Sarah talked a little bit about that big breakdown that she had, where it was never expressed, but it definitely felt like there was a tipping point of like, I need to figure this out, or she's not going to stay with me.
Yeah.
It just, there was never a threat of divorce there, but it definitely felt like.
Did you feel like you were at that point?
Close.
Yeah.
I remember that time was so hard. I had that big breakdown, and he was at work one day, and I just remember being in my bed and like kneeling and putting my face in my bed and being like, do I need to divorce him? Like, I'm so over this. I'm so over this. Like, do I need to divorce him? Like, so the thought of divorce definitely came up.
Yeah.
And I specifically remember that moment. I never brought it up to him. I never was like, I think we need to get a divorce. I never had like an ultimatum or whatever.
Yeah.
So at this point, I'm getting pretty desperate, right? I'm seeing that opening up is helping, but it hasn't gotten rid of it. And I'm making progress, but I'm not perfect.
Yeah.
I'm doing the things. I bought the $12,000 worth of coaching. We were going to the temple. I was going to the bishops. I was doing the things. We were doing the church addiction recovery program. Nothing was really working. And this is when I got really desperate, and I went to a friend, and the friend had recommended ayahuasca. He's like, dude, you need to go deeper. Like, there's something still there that you need to go figure out. Then a couple months later, I found myself in the jungles of Colombia with 30 people I didn't know, and there I was doing the thing, doing the ayahuasca. And it probably was one of the most spiritual, impactful moments of my life. But there was this moment, and this is going to sound so woo-y to people that haven't done this stuff.
Yeah. Well, I've talked all about it, so don't worry on this podcast.
Yeah. So like, people are going to see me and be like, dude, that's so weird. But I mean, it is what it is. But there was this moment where in the journey, they call it a journey when you're like kind of in the headspace of it. And this naked woman approached me in my journey. And don't think of it like a vision. Think of it like a strong memory almost. And I couldn't get her out of my head. And I was like, hey, I'm coming to overcome pornography, not look at pornography here. Like, I was so resistant, like, get the freak out of here. I don't want to look at you. Part of the journey, I was looking at Sarah, and Sarah just said, hey, I'll be here when you get back, but you need to go through this. And she just left. And I'm alone with this naked woman. And like, this is like a beautiful woman. And I'm like, oh my gosh, is this like a spouse that I'm like, I was so scared.
Yeah.
Like, is this the woman I was supposed to marry? Like, so freaking scared. And then there's like this peace that came over me. It was like, just allow it. Just go through it. And I allowed myself to look at this naked woman. And I think it was the first time in my life that I was able to look at a woman's body in not a lustful way. I was able to see her breasts not as objects or sexual things, but as like life-giving. Like, I don't know how to explain it. And I saw her vagina not as a sexual thing, but as a literal portal from like heaven. 'Cause like spirits and babies literally go through that to the earth.
Yeah.
And
That's so cool.
it was such
I wish every man could see this.
it was such a powerful moment for me because, I mean, I'd been conditioned since I was 10 to view women as objects, to view women as sexual beings. And that was like the first time that I was like, oh my gosh, there's so much more to women and divinity that I had ever thought.
That is so cool.
And there was a moment where I went to the fire. This sounds so woo-wee to everybody, but the fire asked for this black box that was inside me, and the black box was my pornography addiction. And I handed it over to the fire. It's interesting because, like, I don't feel like that was like the key turning point, but definitely something happened there. There was a shift that happened, and things got a lot better after that.
That's so cool. I have a thought about this. I feel like on ayahuasca, I experienced my highest self, and then I got home from ayahuasca, and then I wasn't that person, and it really was frustrating for me. I don't know, I'm emotional, but it just made me think, like, I experienced that, so I know what it feels like, and I know that that's possible. So almost like you giving it to the fire, it's like, no, you can't do this. Like, this is a thing, and I'm sure you felt it, the release inside of you.
Maybe that's what it was. Maybe it planted the seed of like, hey, this is going to be gone. Like, this doesn't have to be part of your life, your whole life, which I always thought it was. But
like a forever thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, you talk to any guy in the church, it's like, oh, this is a temptation your whole life, so you better learn to deal with it because it's going to be here your whole life. And I don't believe that personally. I believe that I'm at a point where I don't expect myself to be perfect, but like the desire is gone. And it took a lot of work to get there. It's no longer there.
Yeah. Okay, I really, really love what you started with ayahuasca. And it made me think about when I was in ayahuasca. I remember thinking, and it makes me uncomfortable to say this, but we're not doing that. No shame here. But I remember thinking my vagina is a portal. I remember thinking that in ayahuasca. So that's crazy. And I was like, it is a portal. Like, I remember my eyes were just like, I'm just in this medicine and like, holy shit, my vagina is a portal. Like, there's magic here, and it's true.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
I love that experience so much. Yeah, that's so cool. Okay, so another topic really quick that I want to talk about is masturbation, because I feel like masturbation and pornography can be like hand in hand. And then it's kind of, but like masturbation is such a beautiful way to connect with your body. And then like growing up Mormon, we're not supposed to do either. And it kind of gets confusing, but then I feel like as I've gotten older, you learn a little bit more that like, no, that's a really healthy way to connect with your body. So I'd love to know like your kind of thoughts and ideas about that, like especially in a marriage too.
Yeah, I would say in a marriage, we're very much still figuring that out, but we have definitely opened the conversation to it. And I view masturbation as a tool that can be good or can be harmful. You can abuse it and you can use it for good.
Yeah.
It's interesting to try and find that line of, okay, when was it okay and when did I kind of abuse it? And we've kind of opened the doors in our own relationship to experiment and to trust ourselves that if that does happen, that we were feeling it. And if we weren't, and if we did abuse it, then we'll have a conversation about it and we'll talk about it.
Yeah.
It is very much new to us and we're still learning. And kind of what I found in myself is that there's almost 3 levels again. It's like you look at porn and masturbate and it's just useless and yucky feeling almost. And then there is a part where, okay, now you can use masturbation as a tool. But then I almost see like there's almost a level higher than just masturbating where it's like, and not to go too much into detail, but almost like semen retention and saving that energy and using it with your spouse, which I don't really know where I'm at with all of that yet. Yeah. It's still very new to us, but I mean, just opening the doors.
Has it been hard for you to separate porn and masturbation?
It took a switch to be like, hey, they're 2 separate things. I think it's okay to have sexual thoughts, but there can be a very pure way of masturbating that I think is powerful.
Yeah, I think that the idea of masturbation is something that Hunter and I are trying to be a lot more open-minded with, especially just because growing up, it has been something of like touching yourself is bad and you can't masturbate. And so kind of just more allowing us to maybe open up that belief and be like, well, maybe it's not such a bad thing to touch yourself. I mean, who can say you can't touch yourself? Like, it's your body. So I think, but for me, again, it's something that we're actually kind of working in our relationship right now. It's been hard for me to separate pornography and masturbation for Hunter.
Yeah.
And being like, okay, so you're saying like, is this just your way of like still coping with something,
Yes,
but
totally.
but you're saying that it's okay now. So, but I think that I'm just having to kind of trust that, he's on his journey and he has done the best he has with pornography ever. And masturbation is definitely something that we're being more open-minded about in our relationship. And kind of I think it's something that we're not closed off to, and seeing how it feels.
Yeah.
I think that for some couples, it could be a really great and healthy thing, and maybe for some others. But I think that it's another thing where not looking at masturbation as good nor bad, just seeing if it helps.
Yeah.
Maybe
and
not.
I feel like
don't know.
whole theme of your guys' thing is just like being so honest. And like, you're just working together. So no one's doing anything in secret. And it's just like, I don't know. I think that's so, so powerful. Like, I'm so happy that you guys have gotten to that point. And I think, I know I've said this already, but it's just so rare. And I think you guys are going to help so many people like understand that that's possible.
Yeah.
Cause I'm sure at points you were, like you said, you had your breaking point. Like, this is done. I'm done. It's over.
It's taken a while to get to this place, and I'm sure there's still much for us to learn and grow, but
If there's one like message across from this episode is I really just hope that it provides hope. Like, for men that are struggling with it, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and getting rid of pornography can be so much easier than you think. You just need the right tools, and that's what I try to provide. And
I
then
think
also,
sorry to interrupt. I just think this goes with like any addiction too, Like, I think there's so much hope in just like, not just looking at the tip of the iceberg, but the entire thing like you've done.
yeah, and not just avoiding it, not white knuckling, not using blockers, not doing all these things. There's a much easier way to approach it, and that's through acceptance, looking at the deeper iceberg, what you were saying. It's hard work, but it's much easier than trying to avoid pornography your whole life, right? And then also just hope for the spouse that, like, hey, there's nothing wrong with you. This isn't about you. And there are ways that you guys can communicate about this, and it can be a healthy thing. And I believe if I was struggling with it right now, Sarah and I can still be in a very healthy spot in our relationship and still be in a great marriage.
Yeah.
I mean, we felt that our whole time we've been married. It's like, man, we have an awesome marriage except for this one thing. But I mean, we can't take away what we've had. And even if I still was going through it, we still would have a great relationship with it. So that's what I wanted to add in.
Okay. I love that. And okay, where would you say the very, very first step is? Just being honest with like your spouse or your girlfriend, or?
I would say the very first step before integrity is getting rid of shame.
Yeah.
Like allowing it.
Yeah.
It's not bad. It's not good. It's neutral. Being curious instead of judgmental. Like not just hating on yourself for looking at porn, but why did I look at porn? Why am I feeling the urge to look at porn? I'd say that's step one before integrity with the spouse, but the integrity with the spouse is a very close second step.
Yeah.
And then there can be more steps. Like I said, it's 80% of the work, integrity and shame. But then there could be like past traumas that need to be healed and other deeper stuff.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. If there was one thing that you guys could have everybody in the world understand, what would it be? And this doesn't have to be surrounding pornography. It just like in general for each of you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an expert in a lot of things. I feel like I've done a ton of research in the pornography and shame. And if there was just one message, it's like, if someone's dealing with pornography, there's nothing wrong with you. There's no chemical imbalance. It's not that you're bad. It's not that you're a pervert. It's not that you're overly sexualized. There's nothing wrong with you. You've just been conditioned to use it as a tool to cope with emotions. And there's a very clear way out.
So often we are focused on improving relationships with others. It's often said, like, think less about yourself and just serve others. And I actually kind of disagree with that. I think that what I want everyone to know is when you can actually first work on the relationship with yourself and truly dig inwards and not just read self-help books, although I think that's a great start, but like really become self-aware of how do I feel about myself and my relationship with myself, my body, everything. And really making that your best relationship, all the other things in your life will align and be a lot better. So if there's any relationship that you are going to work on and improve first, it needs to be the relationship with yourself.
Yeah. Thank you. I love that. And also, I just wanted to, like, is there openings in your program? And do you have openings as well for like clients?
Yeah, I have a few openings. If you want.
And how can they find you?
Yeah, you can just find me on Instagram, Sarah Clark, 3Ks _. And yeah, you can just DM me. I'm not taking on a ton more clients right now because obviously it's hard to balance time with a baby.
Yeah.
But I do have a few openings if someone is interested in working with me.
And then on your Instagram, you share like tons of tips and all these things. Yeah. Okay. Awesome.
We've gotten like an overwhelming amount of guys that have reached out to me, and I don't have the systems in place to handle everything right now. But I do want to open up another group in like mid-November.
Okay.
So we're booked right now.
Cool. But I'm sure if someone wanted to message you or something.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I'm totally an open book. I was talking specifically about the program, but on my Instagram, I talk all about it, and you can DM me and we can talk about it. And
cool.
I actually do have a free community that guys can join and ask questions. It's on my Instagram bio. My Instagram is _hunter.clark.
Okay.
And yeah, you can get all that information.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Okay, sorry. Expand it a little bit. What's in the free community?
Yeah, the free community, there's over 100 guys in there that it's just a place where people can ask questions. I try and post in it daily. And there's a free course in there as well.
Cool.
That I created just on what I've learned from my journey.
Wow, a free course. That's awesome.
It won't be for long. I'm just trying to get feedback on it so I can improve it.
Cool.
But we are still very new on this journey.
Yeah.
If anybody is interested in either joining a group that has spouse support and the getting rid of the shame, I will open another one up in November.
Cool.
So
yay. Well, thank you guys so much. You're amazing. And I'm sure I'll have you on again because there's just so many insights and
thanks, Jenna. This was fun.
Yes. And yeah, you guys are the best. Amen.
Amen.